There is a people in the heart of Africa who hunt animals weighing 250 kilograms, using only bows and arrows. No rifles, no traps, no vehicles. They are the Hadzabes. And the prey you are about to follow is the African wildebeest, an animal that can run at 80 kilometers per hour, with curved horns capable of wounding even a lion. And that travels in herds of thousands. The Hadzabes are not intimidated. They have been doing this for over 40,000 years, with bare hands, a bow made from a branch, and arrows poisoned with plant sap. This is the reality of one of the last hunter-gatherer tribes on the planet. And what you're about to see is how they face the giant of the savannah and turn the hunt into a meal, right there in the middle of the wild. No stove, no pot, nothing but fire and earth. The place where this happens is in northern Tanzania, far from any city, far from any paved road. It is the region of Lake Eyasi, a valley nestled between the Ngorongoro highlands and the Serengeti plains. The lake itself is shallow, salty, and changes size with the seasons. In the dry season, its shores become white salt flats. When the rains come, the water returns and brings the animals with it. This is the landscape where the Hadzabes live, without permanent homes, without electricity, without running water, without cell phone signal, only temporary camps made of branches and dry grass. Each group has between 20 and 30 people, and when the resources run out in one spot, they move. Simple as that, as they have done for millennia. The Hadzabes are one of the last genuinely hunter-gatherer peoples on Earth. About 1,300 remain, but only around 300 still live exclusively in the traditional way, without farming, without raising animals, without any kind of food storage. Every day starts from zero. What will be eaten must be found, hunted, or gathered that same day. That means at dawn, the men are already on their feet, checking their arrows, testing the tension of the bow, scanning the horizon. Failure in the hunt is not an abstract concept, it is real hunger. But wait, there is something that makes the Hadzabes even more extraordinary. The language they speak. Hadzine is a unique language in the world. It has no proven relationship to any other known language. It is a language isolate, and one of its most striking features is the clicks, sounds produced by the tongue against the palate, the teeth, or the roof of the mouth, sounds that are part of every word, every command during the hunt, every whisper among the bushes while stalking prey. And it is in this ancient language that the hunters communicate when they spot the target, the wildebeest, also known as the GNU, an animal that defines the East African landscape like few others. The western white-bearded wildebeest, the subspecies that inhabits the Serengeti and Lake Eyasi region, weighs between 180 and 250 kilograms. It has tall, muscular shoulders that slope backward, forming an almost disproportionate silhouette. The head is broad, rectangular, with horns that curve outward to the sides and then upward. They are made of pure keratin, hard as stone, and sharp enough to pierce a predator's flank. Now pay attention to this part. The wildebeest is not an easy prey. Despite its awkward appearance, it is surprisingly agile. It can change direction at full speed. It leaps over obstacles with ease. And when threatened, it reacts. It rears up. It snorts. It stamps its hooves on the ground. When cornered, it attacks with its horns with violence. Experienced lions know that attacking an adult wildebeest alone is risky. Even a pack of hyenas sometimes retreats before a determined male. That is the animal the Hadzabes choose to face with an arrow. And there is more. The wildebeest is a gregarious animal. It lives in herds that can range from 10 to hundreds of individuals. At certain times of the year, during the Great Migration, these herds merge into superherds of over 1 million animals. In the Serengeti ecosystem between Tanzania and Kenya, wildebeest travel up to 1,600 kilometers per year, following the rain, following the green grass, always on the move. When these migration routes cross Hadzabes territory, the hunters know. They watch for signs, tracks in the soft soil, dust on the horizon. The deep, unmistakable sound of the wildebeest, a profound grunt that echoes across the savannah. This is where it gets interesting. The Hadzabes do not chase after the herd. The strategy is the opposite. Silence, patience, ambush. The most important technique of the Hadzabes, who live in remote areas, is ambush hunting. They study the terrain. They identify the paths animals use to reach water. And during the dry season, when water sources become scarce, these paths turn into predictable corridors. Wildebeest need to drink almost every day. That is their weak point, and the Hadzabes know exactly how to exploit it. In the dry season, hunters frequently work in pairs. They leave camp before dawn. They carry with them the bow, the arrows, the fire stick, and a small axe. Nothing else. They walk kilometers across the dry savannah until they find a water point that still has some volume. There they take position, sometimes up in a tree, sometimes behind bushes, covered with dirt and foliage to mask their scent. And they wait. For hours, the entire night if necessary, without moving, without making a sound, until the wildebeest comes close enough for the shot. Now comes the part that few people know. The weapon of the Hadzabes is not just the bow, it is the poison. To hunt large animals like the wildebeest, the Hadzabes use arrows with poison tips. The most common poison is extracted from the desert rose, a plant called Adenium obesum. The Hadzabes call it panjuko. This plant has an unmistakable bulbous trunk and pink flowers, but behind the delicate appearance lies one of the most lethal substances in African nature. All parts of the plant contain cardiac glycosides, toxic compounds that upon entering the bloodstream directly affect the animal's heart. They cause muscle weakness, disorientation, and ultimately cardiac arrest. The poison-making process is precise. The Hadzabes collect the sap and parts of the plant, then boil everything until a thick black paste remains. This paste is then beaten, cut into thin strips, and carefully wrapped behind the arrowhead. When the tip pierces the animal's skin and the poison contacts the blood, the effect begins. First, the wildebeest becomes restless, then unsteady. Its movements lose coordination. The legs begin to tremble, and it slows down. The hunters know they do not need to run. They only need to follow. The first signs of intoxication include excessive salivation and vomiting. As the substance spreads through the body, the animal loses its balance. It becomes lethargic, and then it falls. But this does not happen in seconds. The process can take hours. It depends on the size of the animal, the location of the impact, and the potency of the poison. And that is where a skill enters that can only be learned through decades of practice. Reading tracks. The Hadzabes follow the wounded wildebeest across the terrain, observing every mark on the ground. Deeper tracks on one side indicate the animal is limping. A winding trail suggests it is losing its balance. Broken branches at a specific height show it is staggering. Every detail tells part of the story. Think about what this means in practice. Two men, without any technology, walking across the African savanna under heat that can exceed 45 degrees, following an animal that weighs nearly 3 times as much as them, with unwavering patience, not knowing for certain when the animal will fall, with no guarantee it will work, because sometimes it does not. The arrow may not penetrate deep enough. The poison may have lost its potency. The animal may reach the herd and disappear among hundreds of other wildebeest. When that happens, the Hadzabes return to camp empty-handed, and they try again the next day. But when it works, the result changes everything. When a wildebeest falls, it is not just a meal, it is an event. Among the Hadzabe, there is a concept called epeme. It is the idea of manhood, of maturity, of connection between the hunter and the prey. A man becomes epeme when he brings down a large animal for the first time. This usually happens around the age of 20. And from that moment on, he gains access to exclusive parts of the animal: kidney, lung, heart, neck, tongue. These parts are considered epeme and can only be consumed by men who have already achieved this status. No woman, no child, and no man who has not yet killed a large animal may even be present during the consumption of these parts. And that is exactly what you are about to witness. The moment the hunt becomes food, right there, in the middle of the savannah. When the wildebeest finally falls, the hunters approach with caution. They check whether the animal is truly dead. Then the processing begins. The first thing they do is light a fire, and the way they do it is as impressive as the hunt itself. The Hadzabe do not use matches. They do not use lighters. They use the hand-drilled friction method. Every hunter carries a fire stick with him, a long piece of hard wood, usually made from Dombeya kirkie, the same wood used to make their bows. It is a wood they call mutateko. This stick is almost sacred. They carry it alongside their arrows, always within reach. The process works like this. The hunter places a piece of soft wood on the ground. He makes a small notch in the surface. He positions the fire stick vertically in that notch, and he begins to spin the stick between his palms, pressing downward as he spins. The friction between the two pieces of wood generates heat, growing heat, until a fine, dark powder begins to accumulate at the base. That powder is actually carbonized wood fiber. When it reaches the right temperature, it begins to glow, a tiny ember, almost invisible. The hunter then transfers this ember to a nest of dry grass. He blows carefully, slowly, controlling the airflow until the grass catches fire, and within moments, what was merely friction transforms into flame. It sounds simple. It is not. It takes years of practice. It requires the right wood in the right state of dryness. It requires the correct technique of pressure and rotation. It requires calm when sweat runs down the hands and makes gripping difficult. Hadzabe boys begin practicing this from the moment they learn to walk. It is one of the first skills any child in the group must master. Now that the fire is lit, the preparation begins. And this is where the Hadzabe's relationship with food reveals itself completely. There is no elaborate ceremony. There is no unnecessary waiting. The internal organs are the first to be prepared. The liver is removed with the axe and by hand, cleaned quickly, and placed directly on the coals. No skewer, no grill, no pot. The liver on the coals. The smell of cooking meat spreads through the dry savanna air. Within minutes, the outer surface turns golden and crispy. The inside remains soft, almost creamy. The hunters eat right there, standing, with their hands, tearing off pieces of hot meat. The heart comes next, a dense, muscular organ with an intense flavor and a firm texture. It is cut into smaller pieces and distributed among the epeme men present. Each piece is placed on the coals until the surface darkens. It is consumed quickly, without accompaniment, without seasoning, just the meat and the fire. The fat that drips from the pieces feeds the flames, creating small bursts of heat that intensify the cooking. But wait, there is something no one talks about. The Hadzabe waste nothing, absolutely nothing. The wildebeest hide is carefully removed and set aside. It will be used to make bow straps, ties for binding arrows, or wrappings for carrying belongings. The larger bones are cracked open to extract the marrow, a concentrated source of fat and nutrients. The tendons are separated and dried. The Hadzabe use tendons from animals like the wildebeest to make bowstrings. The supraspinous ligaments from antelopes like impala and kudu are preferred, but those from wildebeest also work. They are stretched, dried in the sun, chewed to soften them, and then braided into a strong cord. And the remaining meat does not stay there. When the Hadzabes bring down an animal too large to carry back to camp, the entire camp moves to the carcass. That is right. 20 to 30 people dismantle their temporary shelters and walk to the site of the kill. They set up a new camp there, and over the following days the entire community feeds on that animal. The women and children who arrive later bring with them tubers, baobab fruits, and honey. The combination of fresh meat with these plant foods creates a complete diet that sustains the entire group. What comes next changes everything. Because the Hadzabes' relationship with the wildebeest is not just about food, it is about balance, sustainability, and an ecological wisdom that modern science is only beginning to understand. The Hadzabes never kill more than they need. There is no sport hunting. There is no stockpiling. There is no excess. Every animal taken down is a calculated decision. And when the animal falls, every gram is used. This is not a nice philosophical principle to hear. It is a practical necessity for people living on the edge of survival. Wasting meat in an environment where the next meal is uncertain would be foolish. And the Hadzabes are anything but foolish. The boughs they use to bring down a wildebeest are handmade from scratch. The preferred wood is Dombia kirki, a tree that grows along rivers and in rocky areas of East Africa. The hunter cuts a branch with the axe, removes the bark, and carves the wood into a smooth, rounded shape, tapering the ends. Then he heats the branch in hot ashes and bends it, using the fork of a tree as a mold. This process of heating, bending, and carving is repeated several times until the bough has a smooth, uniform curve. To prevent cracking, animal fat or beeswax is applied to the wood during the process. The result is a simple bow without recurve, with a draw force of approximately 311 newtons. That is roughly 70% of the hunter's body weight. The arrows reach speeds of up to 45 meters per second, a shot powerful enough to penetrate the thick skin of a wildebeest. But that bow does not last forever. On average, a Hadzabes bow lasts from 1 month to 1 year. When it breaks or gets lost during the hunt, the hunter simply makes another one. In 2 hours, he can carve a new bow from a fresh branch. This ability to manufacture tools quickly, anywhere, is one of the reasons the Hadzabes have survived for so long. And the arrowheads are another fascinating part. The Hadzabes do not produce metal. They obtain nails and pieces of iron from the Datoga, a neighboring tribe of herders and blacksmiths. In exchange, they offer meat or honey. These nails are worked and shaped into sharp points that are fixed to the arrow shafts. The shafts are made from straight, thin branches, stripped of bark and smoothed. Feathers from guinea fowl or hornbills are tied to the rear to stabilize the flight. Each arrow is a work of meticulous engineering made from materials found in the surroundings. Pay attention to this part. The Hadzabes use 3 different types of arrows. One for birds and small game, with a simple tip. Another for small antelopes and dangerous animals at close range, more robust. And the third, the most important for hunting wildebeest, is the arrow with a poison tip. This differentiation is not random. It is the result of millennia of experimentation and observation. Each type of arrow is designed for a specific purpose, and using the wrong arrow can mean the difference between a successful hunt and a missed opportunity. And there is more. Besides the desert rose, the Hadzabes know at least 2 other sources of arrow poison. One is extracted from the poison arrow vine, a climbing plant of the Strophanthus genus that grows in the mountainous areas of Hadzabes territory. They call it shanjoko. The third source is a poison obtained through trade with neighboring tribes, made from a tree called Acocanthera. All these substances work on the same principle: cardiac glycosides that attack the cardiovascular system of the prey, and all are handled with respect and extreme care. Imagine waking up every day knowing that your next meal depends on your aim, your poison, and your patience. Without a safety net, without a store around the corner, without a backup plan, that is the reality of every Hadzabe hunter, every day, without exception, for an entire lifetime. And now think about the physical dimension of this. The hunter wakes before sunrise, walks kilometers across the savannah in temperatures that exceed 40 degrees during the day, remains motionless for hours in an ambush, fires an arrow that demands a draw force equivalent to lifting 32 kilograms with one hand, then tracks the wounded animal for more kilometers, processes the carcass using only an axe and his hands, lights a fire by friction, cooks, eats, and the next day does it all over again. Most of us would not last a week, and meanwhile the world around the Hadzabe never stops changing. Over the past 50 years, they have lost between 75 and 90% of their traditional territory. Datoga herders advanced into the Yaeda Valley with their herds of cattle and goats. They cut down trees to create pastures. They drove away the game. They dried up the water sources the Hadzabe had used for generations. Farmers fenced off areas that were once freely accessible. The migration routes of the wildebeest were fragmented by fences and human settlements. The impact is direct. With less territory, there is less game. With less game, the diet changes. Some Hadzabe groups can no longer sustain themselves exclusively through hunting and gathering. They have come to depend on supplementary foods like ugali, a cornmeal porridge that is not part of their ancestral diet. The introduction of processed foods threatens not only the culture, but also health. Scientific studies have shown that the Hadzabe gut microbiome is one of the most diverse on the planet. Bacteria that aid in the digestion of tubers, wild game, and bush honey. A diversity that can decline by up to 20% with just a few days on an industrialized diet. But the Hadzabe resist. They have always resisted. Over the centuries, governments and missionaries attempted to settle them, to introduce farming, to impose schooling, to push Christianity. Nearly all these attempts failed. The Hadzabe simply went back to the bush, because the bush is where they know how to live. It is where every plant has a name, a function, and a meaning, where every footprint tells a narrative, where the wind carries information. There is one detail that reveals the depth of the Hadzabe's connection with the natural environment. They maintain a mutualistic relationship with a bird called the honey guide. This small, inconspicuous bird knows the location of wild beehives hidden in the trunks of baobabs and acacias. When a Hadzabe hunter whistles or strikes a tree in a specific way, the bird responds with its own call. And then it flies ahead of the hunter, leading him to the hive. The hunter collects the honey and leaves behind the wax and larvae, which are the bird's favorite food. It is a partnership written in the instincts of both species. No formal agreement, no training, just thousands of years of co-evolution. And the honey they collect is more than just food. It is the Hadzabe's favorite, valued even above meat. Rich in calories, sugars, and micronutrients, honey represents between 15 and 20% of daily caloric intake. To collect it, the men climb enormous baobab trees, trees that can stand over 20 meters tall, without climbing equipment, without rope, just hands, feet, and a courage that defies gravity. But let us return to the wildebeest. Return to that carcass in the savannah, to the fire crackling between the stones, to the meat roasting directly on the coals, to the women arriving with their children, bringing tubers dug from the soil and fruits gathered from the baobabs, to the entire group gathering around that meal. There is no rigid hierarchy among the Hadzabe. There is no chief. There is no king. Decisions are made by consensus, and food is shared equitably. When a hunter returns with meat, it is distributed among everyone present in camp. It does not matter who hunted. It does not matter who is more tired or who worked harder. Everyone eats. That is the rule. a rule that maintains the cohesion of a group that depends on collaboration to survive. And perhaps that is the most powerful lesson. The Hadzabes do not accumulate. They do not compete for resources. They do not build fences around what is theirs. They possess so few material objects that they can carry everything they own on their backs when they need to move. And they move on average 6 times a year. 1 axe shared among 30 people, a few knives, the bows and arrows, which belong individually to the men. And nothing else. The sun begins to set over the Yaeda Valley. The sky turns orange and then purple. The same colors the Hadzabes have seen for 40,000 years. The campfire still glows. The wildebeest meat has been nearly all consumed. The bones are piled up. The hide is stretched out, drying. The children play with pieces of branches, imitating the hunt. The boys practice with small bows made to fit their hands. Tiny arrows they use, trying to hit lizards and insects. That is the training. There is no formal school. There is no manual. There is observation, imitation, and repetition. From the age of 3, every Hadzabe boy receives a bow his own size. And the journey begins that may take 2 decades until the moment he brings down his first large animal and becomes epeme. While the children practice, the older men sit around the fire. When the moon is not visible, they perform the epem dance, a celebration that takes place in near total darkness, without a bonfire, without torches, only the sounds of Hadzane and the rhythm of feet striking the dry ground. It is a ritual that connects the hunters to one another and to previous generations, a moment of reaffirmation of who they are. Hunters, survivors, the last of a lineage that stretches back to the very origins of humanity. Genetically, the Hadzabes represent one of the oldest lineages of the human species. They have no close genetic relationship with any other living people. Their DNA tells the saga of a group that stayed in one place while the rest of humanity spread across the planet, while other peoples invented agriculture. While cities arose and empires fell, the Hadzabes kept doing what they had always done, hunting wildebeest, gathering honey, lighting fire with a wooden stick spun between their palms. And that is the point. It is not that the Hadzabes do not know the world has changed. They do. Many learned Swahili as a second language. Some have had contact with tourists, cameras and cars. But they chose to remain. They chose the bow over the rifle, the grass over the concrete, the silent ambush over the noise of the engine, not out of ignorance, out of conviction, because what they have works. It has worked for 40,000 years, and for them, that is enough. The last piece of wildebeest meat is placed on the coals. The fat sizzles and splatters against the hot stones. A boy of perhaps 5 years old approaches and extends his hand. Someone gives him a piece. He bites, he chews, and he runs off to play, without saying thank you, without asking permission, because among the Hadzabes, food is not a favor, it is a right. Everyone eats, always. Night falls over Lake Ayasi. The stars appear in a quantity that most people in the world will never see. Without light pollution, the Tanzanian sky is a spectacle that defies imagination. The Hadzabes use these stars to orient themselves, to navigate across the territory, to know when it is time to change camp. Tomorrow, it all starts again. The sun will rise. The hunters will check their arrows. Someone will spot fresh tracks in the soil, and the hunt will begin once more, as it did 1,000 years ago, as it did 10,000, as it did 40,000, without haste, without noise, without waste. Just a people, a bow, and the endless savanna. Some things do not need to change. Perhaps those are the ones that matter most.